This is the opportunity for you to ask the questions based on what you actually want to know. Does that make sense? So take advantage of this. This is really the most powerful time of any sort of conference, is this panel. So we're going to start it with this. I can't obviously introduce all these people. It's going to take too long. So we'll start at one end, run this way. Everybody just briefly say who you are, what you do, plug a website, and then go down the road.
My name is Adam Kokish, and I blow people's minds for a living.
My name is Bob Murphy, and I blow people for a living.
My name is Kristen Megan. I haven't blown either of these guys. I'm an industrial hygienist and an advocate against Geo-Engineering.
My name is Luke Gradowski, and I believe in blowing.
My name is Josie Wales, and I am going to stop the sequence of talking about blowing.
Thank you.
My name is Chris Ann Hall. I'm a constitutional attorney, and I like to defeat the liberal lies.
I'm Ed Griffin. I'm a refugee from the People's Republic of California.
I'm Mary Togo, and I'm way more serious than all these guys. I talk about vaccines and how they're destroying our children and our lives. My website is childhoodshots.com.
And I'm even more serious. I'm Joanne Norton. I'm retired from the NYPD. I speak on behalf of law enforcement against prohibition. We're at leap.cc, and we are advocating that all drugs, everything, should be legalized, regulated, and taxed.
I'm Jerry Day. I'm an Emmy-winning television producer that has more views on YouTube than I had on my Emmy-winning TV series. And I have a website, freedomtaker.com, and I help people work out their problems with their smart meters and the problems with those.
I am Jason Burmis. I'm a documentary filmmaker, sometimes activist, and sometimes loudmouth.
Hi, my name is Shem Kellogg. I'm here representing the Free State Project. I talked to a lot of you guys yesterday. I was standing behind the table over there. Thanks.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Fred Eichhorn, National Cancer Research Founder, and I said that wrong. National Cancer Research Foundation. I'm the founder of it. I had pancreatic cancer 37 years ago, and I teach people about the myths of what they call cancer or not, and how the treatments are about making money, not about solving the problem.
Hi, Jake Hayes. I'm with physicians, scientists, and engineers for Healthy Energy. We are a multidisciplinary scientific nonprofit that essentially generates, disseminates, and organizes evidence-based information on different types of novel energy production, of which fracking is one. So that's what I was here to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks for having me.
All right, excuse me. I'm Charlotte Iserbeat. If you can hear me, my mouth is full. Okay. I'm the author of The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, and my website is deliberateddumbingdown.com or americandeception.com.
My name is Tatiana Rose. I'm a singer-songwriter. I believe in peace and freedom, and that's what my representation is, music and changing the world.
Mike, I had a similar experience where in my early career as a television producer, I was producing things for people that were not of my ideology because I thought, oh, this is the ideology my employer expects of me, so I'll send out messages of this kind. So the vast majority of the people, in answer to your question, who are enforcing the agenda do not know the agenda. They don't know it, they don't even care. My boss said do this, I get paid if I do this. And I don't know why. And it's not clear from, for instance, the example, my example was I produced a film in the 1970s on women integrating into the job market. I knew nothing about it, I had no credential for that. I just happened to know that that was a topic that the powers that be were supporting. And I was told that by the Department of Education. I came to them with 9 suggested topics. They said, oh, this one's good. And so it was really that I was subconsciously supporting their messages. Now, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with women integrating the job market. But it's not something I ever would have thought of on my own because I wasn't trained and credentialed in that field. And I didn't know until only a few years ago that I had been, you might say, co-opted by that agenda. I didn't understand. I thought, oh, I had a clever film idea and I sold it. But I was reading the mind of the agenda setters, and I got lucky. So most of the people don't know, and this is the scary thing. Most of the people have no clue that they're supporting a greater, very construct, and matrix, an arc that will accomplish an agenda. And they don't even see the agenda. They only see their own little part of that world. Thank you.
To answer your question, I'm just going to weigh in on this because I'm a behavioral strategist. The reason why people accept these roles and accept these duties and not question it is because what I was talking about yesterday. You have beliefs. Beliefs are wrapped in emotion. They're also kept in your subconscious mind. It's kind of like a smoker. A smoker knows consciously, hey, this is bad for me. Subconsciously, though, there's still that positive chase, whether it's relieving stress or it's because you felt cool when you were 12 when you tried it. And because of that, you have a negative in the conscious, a positive in the subconscious, and when those two things don't match, the subconscious always wins. That's why when you ask this panel, how did you come to your conclusion? How did you wake up? It's never, well, somebody was yelling at me from the Capitol steps. It was always, I saw a documentary, I read a book, because that way when you're alone, your belief system actually has the opportunity to change. This is why we see things like Super Size Me, that comes out, right? 27 million people saw it when it was first released. I think it's like 50 million now. The year after Super Size Me came out, Wall Street Journal was talking about, oh, this is the end of the fast food industry. What happened? They actually set a record year because we still didn't hit that rock bottom point where we have that switch in the conscious and subconscious mind. That's why when I talk against employment, this is why. I mean, she pointed out wherever she went, wrote about it 30 years ago, made a movie 40 years ago, goes back 80 years. People have been protesting the creature from Jekyll Island since 1913. They knew it was bad then, that's why they hid. Yet still, maybe 100 people in a room protesting it. So we need to get to this point where we take back control of our own lives because it allows us then to take control of the questions that we ask. When you're employed, that cop might not agree with it, but he says, well, I can't lose my job. And the scientist might not agree with it, but it goes against the beliefs of science. So consciously they're thinking, well, this doesn't make sense, but subconsciously you can't give up security. Subconsciously, well, these people must know what they're talking about because I've been taught to trust them. And trust, again, is a belief that's wrapped in emotion. So it really is really deep, and all the information in the world going back 100 years hasn't changed this yet. We need to make the change and then take that information and use it.
Time ago, and it took me 20 years before I realized that's what I was doing. I didn't know. Everything is so compartmentalized that I thought I was a subatomic particle physics researcher, right? I didn't know I was doing atomic weapons research until 20 years later. And so that's true for a lot of pilots, it's true for a lot of cops. They think they're doing the right thing. It's true for a lot of teachers. And it's the ones who wake up, do the most subversive thing at all, and that is educate each other. So pick everybody else's brain, that's what you're here for.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Could I just make one one, please? There's in my research on operant conditioning and the computer, going way back, one of the leaders in the movement, he actually was involved in developing the program that I leaked. But in the old research I have, it's in my big book, his name is Donald Ely. He was the head of, involved with all these computer programmers, and he said, it's an amazing quote, and I really want to give this to you today because this is what we're talking about. These people are not all bad. He said, and yet he kept going on with use the computer assisted structure, but he said, you have to have a conscience.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're looking at the development of software, you're not conservative or liberal, but he said, you gotta have a conscience. If you don't agree with that, you don't do it. And I think this is very important because he's just one I found who said that. A lot of them know this. So all of us have to get out there ourselves and quote these people because they're not all bad. Okay, that's it.
What do we do? I mean,
basically I get a one-liner to the people out there. You know, you get one line, and they, after that, their eyes, they go to the other place. But I was just wondering if you had, because what do we do now? I think is always the question.
In my view now, please understand, this is my own analysis of this, but in my view, society is always led by a very few, usually less than 3% of the population, and sometimes less than 1%, are the movers and shakers that determine the direction of any culture or any society. The masses have very little to do with it. There are leaders, there are elites, in other words, natural elites that develop in human groupings. And I don't know whether it's instinct or not, but I think it is. We all have a herd instinct. And so our opponents have understood that long before we have, and they've used it. Their method of changing and controlling society is not to convince everybody intellectually, but to capture the leadership positions of the groups to which people belong, knowing that people will follow their leaders in those groups. So all they have to do is capture the heads of a few major organizations in a society which is far less than 1% of the population, and they got the whole shebang, because people will follow. And so once we got that idea, we started to relook at history and see, did that actually happen? And we find that it's definitely exactly how it happened through all the various secret societies, such as Cecil Rhodes created, you know, the famous secret society that doesn't even have a name. They chose consciously not to have a name, because without a name you can't talk about it. And that was one of their decisions. One of the most powerful groupings in the world. It now controls the United States and all the former British dependencies and so forth. In the United States, the group is called the Council on Foreign Relations. You can trace that back to Cecil Rhodes, on and on and on. My point is that the Council on Foreign Relations is that small group, about 4,000 people, plus or minus, and they run this country. 4,000 people run this country, and everybody else groups around them. How is that possible? It's because those 4,000 people are not shining shoes, they're not selling cars, they're in charge of, they're the management positions of all the power centers of society, like the political parties, the labor unions, the church organizations, the educational system, the media centers. That's where they are. They're at the pinnacle of these power centers, and the people follow them in mass. Now, the conclusion from all of that analysis is that some good and some bad. The good part is that we shouldn't be overly concerned because our neighbor doesn't get it. He'll never get it. He's part of the masses. I hate to sound like an elitist, but this is the way it really is. The masses are called the masses because they're part of the masses, and they'll never lead. They'll always follow. In the American Revolution, what was it, about 1% of the population were real patriots and led the revolution, and the rest they would not declare. Maybe they were for the king, maybe they were for the loyalists, or they're the patriots. They wanted to see who was going to win. Yep. That's the fact. The American Revolution was led and won by about 1% of the population, no more. And so we shouldn't feel bad, well, because our neighbor doesn't get it, and his neighbor doesn't get it. We're not looking for them. I often say when you run into a roadblock like that, you just go, next, because we're looking for that 1%. Now, if we can get that 1% and mobilize them to do exactly what our opponents have done, they've gone into the power centers of society and they've taken them over. If we can reverse that process, that is the answer to your question. We can do it, but we have to know what we're doing, and we have to be diligent about it.
I would just disagree slightly. I would say, you know, you only get one sentence out and then somebody's turning their head. I really do believe people want to relate to one another. So find a point of agreement and expand upon that. That's what I've always done. Because I truly believe we can bring more people into this movement. I really think the only way that we're going to do that is to relate to one another. If we want to take over these power structures, if we want to challenge really an oligarchy that's been in control hundreds of years, yes, they take smaller players in, and you might be able to get into the Council on Foreign Relations if you're not from wealth and you're not from royalty and you work very hard. But a lot of the times, you know, you see these same names, the same Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Royals out of London. They've been in control for quite some time now. And in order I think to challenge that, first of all, you know, in 2014, we have to get past the mindset that royalty should even exist. The idea that somebody should rule over another human based on their bloodline and not the content of their character is absolutely insane to me. And we still have that. You know, we might have all these technological wonders in the world. We can share information through the internet in the blink of an eye. We all are hooked in with our cell phones, and it's going to get a lot crazier with Google Glass and all these smart gadgets we're going to be wearing in the next 5 years. I promise you. I work for a tech company. You're going to be seeing it everywhere. How are we going to use that to our advantage? How are we going to relate to one another to try to overthrow this power structure that keeps consolidating its power and keeps oppressing its people further and further?
You know, I just want to add real quickly to that. We have to stop enabling it too. And we love to blame. What does the power structure do to get us, right? But when a 5-year-old comes to you, we tell them they can be anything they want. When a 16-year-old comes to you, you tell them to take an aptitude test. We are creating cattle. And we love to blame the farmer, going back to that farmer analogy yesterday, but we're doing it. You know, we tell the kids, well, if everybody jumped off a bridge, would you do it? And we say, no, because that's stupid. And then we tell them when they're 18, go to college, get a job like everybody else, and jump off the damn bridge. And we have to stop creating the cattle for these people to rule over. And there comes a point, you know, from a strategy perspective, you never fight a battle on the battlefield your enemy designed. And we keep fighting them in Washington, D.C. They own that, by the way. We keep fighting them in all these areas where they built the battlefield. It's the stupidest place to fight these people. But that's the default place we go. And all the arguments, all the information in the world does you absolutely no good.
It's very important. Yesterday I mentioned it. I designed the devil's 7-pronged fork is very important. And if you can get to your neighbors and explain to them how it happened, it's genius that put it together. I don't think any human mind could ever do that. That's why I call it devil's 7-pronged fork. They took the gradualism, semantic deception, the Hegelian dialectic, as much money as they wanted, controlled media, and both parties the same at the top. Now, if you go out and you tell your neighbors, that's why you don't understand it. I don't really understand either. We've got to help people understand that that is a diabolical plan that has absolutely worked. Nobody in this room can deny that.
You are all here because you've had some sort of awakening. And when you go back to your businesses, to your home, to your families, and try to explain to them some of the things that you have learned here today, you're going to hear things like, ooh, tinfoil hat. Okay? I'm going to tell you that because I was there. I was on the other side going, hey man, keep your tinfoil hat off me. But this is what I want to share with you, a little story to help illustrate what I'm trying to say, or what we are trying to say. In that when you approach people with this stuff and they give you this whole tinfoil hat thing, or, you know what, I don't believe that stuff, that is not your cue to walk away and just leave them alone, okay? You've all heard of Paul Revere, right? Paul Revere had a message to give, but the message was so important it was not left with just Paul Revere. There were 2 routes and 2 groups of people that went in 2 different directions to deliver that message. Along Paul Revere's route, he was captured by British forces several times, had to use the community, people in the community to come and facilitate his release. He had to get across the Charles River and get a horse on the other side. It took community involvement to have this happen. When he went to his when he achieved his destination, he was met by the sentinel of the property, the guard of the property, because he's yelling, the regulars are coming, the regulars are coming. And the guard, the sentinel of the property, comes out and meets Paul Revere and says, shut up. It's after midnight. Do you not know what time it is? He says, you got to stop all this noise. You're going to wake the master of the house. Can you imagine everything that Paul Revere had just been through to be told to shut up? He looks at the sentinel and says, noise. You'll have noise soon enough. The regulars are coming. And so what Revere did was say, didn't say, oh, okay, I'm sorry about the noise, I'll go about my way and whatever. What he did was he impressed upon the sentinel the danger, the imminent danger that was coming. And he didn't stop until he realized the danger. See, that's what we have to do, because we have to keep talking. When they say, oh no, I don't want to hear that, I don't want to listen to that, you know, emails, read my emails, what do I have to hide? What do I care about my cell phone conversations? That sort of thing. Your continual teaching, and not in their faces screaming at them, but just gentle education.
Yes, you can have an influence. It starts with one person. And so, as Mr. Griffin says, there are an elite group who are opposing us. We have an elite group on our side, but sometimes we have to alert our fellow elites. I think that's the central point.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. I was speaking about genetically modified organisms yesterday, and I've spoken to, you know, the top researchers, Jeffrey Smith. Everybody knows Jeffrey Smith in the room?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. You know, genetic roulette and all of this. 5% of the United States population has to just say no. Shift their dollars to buying non-organic, non-GMO food. That's powerful. That's my message yesterday. These big companies, I don't want anyone to get the message that the masses are just whatever and forget that, because I think that's a dangerous concept. I agree with what mostly has been said here on the panel just in the last few minutes. Go out and speak to someone in a normal way, relate to them. If they have allergies, if they're not feeling well, and they're saying something to you like, I don't know what's going on. Don't make fun of them in your mind. Don't blow them off like they're one of the masses, they don't get it. Tell them something that's meaningful. Maybe your intestines are clogged. Maybe there's a lot of chemicals in there. Maybe your doctor just doesn't know. Right. Don't sound like a tinfoil hat, radical nut job screaming and yelling at someone who has no clue what Charlotte's talking about, no clue about any of these documentaries, and then you push them away. And then afterwards you say, they don't get it. It's how we speak to them. 5% of the American population will end GMOs. That's why the big companies are spending millions of dollars. They are shaking in their boots because we are waking up one at a time.
We've all heard the expression, you can't lead a horse, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's the stupidest expression in the world. You can if you make the horse thirsty first. So instead of like pushing this idea of you have to read this, you have to watch this, again, it comes back to belief. If you approach them and say, well, you got to read George Griffin or George Griffin's book, Creature from Jekyll Island, they're going to say, oh, you're just one of those tin hat people. But if you said, I read this crazy book, man, you are so much smarter than me. Can you please read this and tell me if this guy makes sense? Please help me. It changes the dynamic.
We seem to all be trained in our society to consider First Amendment activity as somehow being civilly disobedient, whereas I would argue it's the height of civil obedience to, for example, assemble and petition in Washington for a redress of grievances. Nothing that should be punished or threatened with punishment at all.
So it's a good idea. Yes, we have to be in the troops. We have to be working together. But be careful how things are manipulated. And when you have people that can deliver the good messages, make sure that they do get the forum and do get the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know that that's how your national presidential elections work as well? The Democratic Party and the Republican parties are not governmental entities. They're private corporate clubs that are given governmental benefit and governmental control over how you vote, who can vote, and who can run for office. And your presidential debates are run exactly the same way he has just mentioned to you. So I want to offer you quickly another solution. It's called Open Debates 2016. OpenDebates2016.com is a project where we are going to have a minimum of 10 debates for everyone who is constitutionally qualified and ballot qualified to be engaged in presidential debates. The candidates will not receive the questions ahead of time, which they do in the Democrat and the Republican debates. And every candidate will have an opportunity to answer the questions. And the questions will be posed by a citizen coalition that you can be a part of. So these are things that you can do to help change this around and end this paradigm that all we have is the lesser of two evils and we really only have two choices. Because that is a manipulation, that is a lie perpetrated on the people in order to embed those people that they want us to have.
Amen.
Yep. You just violated us.
Yes. Yeah.
You're not worthy of my vote. You should not be sitting in that seat you're sitting on. You know, you have no entitlement to warm that seat with your fanny. Because we just brought you evidence, we just brought you demand, and you're ignoring it. And you are not fit for public service and you do not qualify.
But he will laugh at you behind your back if you don't get rid of him and make consequences.
Anytime that you have that many people, exactly, and nobody knows about it. I didn't know about it. Yeah, beyond who was there, they're not going to know. Now, I'm not going to say the solution is, let's tape this thing and then all of a sudden, you know, butterflies and unicorns and everything's great. What you do is create a record beyond just a blurb that's in a newspaper 5 years down the line when this same official is running for a bigger piece of office. You create a piece of media. Look how this person ignored the will of 1,000 people. You may not win the battle that day. You may not win it next week. But by putting it on the record and slickly putting it out like any media organization would, you know, taking that 1 hour forum or 2 hour forum where you all got up in front of a microphone and cutting it down to 3-4 minutes of the most powerful stuff. You may only get 5,000 views the first couple years, but all of a sudden that person is rising in his political field, his name's coming up, that video could go viral. That could make the difference tomorrow. So I always tell people, get a video record of your activism. Not only does it protect you in a world of free speech zones and corrupt police officers, but it also enables you to go after these vipers later on.
A lot of talk about how we have to stop the Federal Reserve, we got to do this, we got to do that. There's always talk of what we got to do, but there's never talk about what we're going to do after we've achieved those goals. And there's always a concern when you displace a established elite, you replace it with a counter-elite. So the question is, as leaders, what do we do to watch the tide for establishing new elites who could be far worse than the previous elites?
The answer to your question is that as long as we're thinking about protesting, that's not enough, even if we have the masses. If we have 99% of the population, 99.99, and they are not empowered, they do not have the power to make things happen. It's just like being in prison. The guards have the guns, and 99.99% of the population there are controlled by the guards and the warden. So our motto has always been, we've got to recapture control of the power centers, and the rest of that means we've got to come to power. We have to control the forces of coercion. Now, that leads to your question. If we are now in position at this future goal, and we have the power of coercion, the power of the state, what's to protect society and even ourselves from ourselves? We aren't corrupted by
What do we do when we become that very establishment?
Yeah, we've done a lot of thought to that, and it's not an easy answer.
That's something I don't really hear too often.
Yeah, I know. And the answer, I believe, is that we don't just start into this battle without having answered that question. Because if as has been said many times here, that we've got to replace this person, we've got to get him out of office, where's the rest of it? Who are we going to put in? You see, if we just replace somebody, the next guy is apt to be just as bad or worse with the same philosophy, just stepping into the shoes and continuing on. So how do we make sure that we, ourselves, part of our little elite group who believe in freedom, what's to protect us and our followers from being corrupted by this power of coercion? And the answer, I believe, is that we must have a code, a creed of what we believe in. We have to state in advance what we will and will not do. Everybody has to sign off on it. We have to watch each other like hawks because nobody can be trusted under some circumstances. People will they'll violate their own principles if they have to protect their family, for example. You just have to watch each other by hawks. That is why we have what we call the Creed of Freedom. Anybody that signs on to that Creed of Freedom has stated in advance what they will and will not do, and the minute they step out of line, then everybody who's part of their group will call them on it and get them out of that position, just because they violated those principles. Now, does that mean it's an automatic answer? No, because it does require the watchdog mentality. There's no way around that. You can't just write it on a piece of paper and expect it like a constitution to enforce itself. You need watchdog. And that's what Freedom Force is all about.
We have to be careful when we start talking about masses and elite. It's, as mentioned, it's a dynamic thing. Today you're a mass, tomorrow you're an elite. It depends on how you behave. I have an expression, and that is, no one, let's see how this goes. You may not rightfully take the freedom of another. You may not wrongfully demand freedom for yourself. All right? So there's two sides to the responsibility. That's what Mr. Griffin was talking about, is that you can't just come up and be an elite and act like an elite and claim that. You can, but you're not really there until you understand your responsibility to not infringe on others.
It's actually really quite simple. If you don't want people to abuse power over you, stop asking for people to have power over you. And all of these solutions and everything that's been discussed is feeding into the current paradigm that we need some form of government, that humanity is destined to be part of a society where we accept that force and coercion is an acceptable way to solve problems, and it's not. And I'm not being utopian by describing a stateless society. The real utopians are the ones who think that we can have government as a monopoly on force and that we're not going to end up with any of the problems that we have today. You want to say, how do we stop people from being corrupt when they have power over us? Don't give them that power over us. And a lot of people who understand these issues will see the ideal of a voluntary society. Either you believe in freedom or you don't. If you believe in freedom, the only ideal of a just society is one that is free of coercion. And if you have a society that is free of coercion, you cannot have anything that we have today called government. It is fundamentally incompatible. The question becomes then, how do we get there? And again, the answer is relatively simple, and it's something that it has to be, obviously, something that hasn't been tried before. And the answer is localization. Because everybody who talks about these problems can see that the current system is unsustainable. We talk about the coming collapse, and people are, who are here talk about various things you have to do to protect yourself, and survivalism, and being prepared, and that's all very important. But are you really ever going to convince the masses who are dependent on government to say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good plan, let's just withdraw our support till the system collapses? Hell no. And if you're compassionate as a libertarian, you shouldn't be advocating something that's going to pull the rug out from underneath so many people. So the process of localization is actually a very simple concept where you dismantle governments from the top down. And you restore local power, and in the process of doing that, you have the beautiful embodiment of self-government happening through local governance. And it's not that local governance is the end-all be-all, because you're not going to want to end up with a local tyrant and all the problems that are entailed with that. But you go down eventually, and the objective is a truly free society that is based on the principles of freedom. Not we're going to have more freedom or we're going to have relative freedom, because if you accept that, you are accepting some coercion. You are accepting some injustice. Freedom is a very simple concept based on absolute philosophical principles that you as a free, beautiful, independent human being own yourself. Therefore, the non-aggression principle should be our guiding moral principle, and that's it. Any government of any kind that is not, just a private property organization that you might call government in a voluntary society is fundamentally in violation of those principles. With that objective, you can move forward to localization, and in that process, you are inspiring self-government. You have to wean people off of this dependence, and the way to do it is to not even try to do it where you're going to try to keep us in this ridiculous national collective. But as long as we accept that we need this, we're going to have the problems that you point out. So how do you get to the objective of self-government? It's really simple. You take things apart from the top down, and you restore power locally.
In terms of a practical solution, I'm here representing the Free State Project. It's an effort to get 20,000 activists to relocate. So I'm asking you to pick up and move. I understand this is a Save Long Island Forum. I would offer that maybe it's time to throw in the towel on Long Island. So I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project.
Be careful. I'm Maine, I know.
So New Hampshire has no sales tax, no income tax. You know, you can buy a gun without a permit, you can carry it without a permit, you don't have to wear a seatbelt if you don't want to, or a helmet if you don't want to. So I offer, I mean, if you're an activist and you really care about what you're doing, you know, don't necessarily waste your time. I grew up in Massachusetts. I realized that I could spend my whole life there as an activist to try to eliminate the sales tax. It was never going to happen. I mean, why not start from the, you know, the freest state? Localization. I mean, come, please. I would love for you to move up there with me. I'm like trying to make a difference. Like I ask that you put the move in movement.
Smart meter has a digital face on it that looks like a clock radio, little LED type of display. A safe analog meter looks like mechanical dials. There is a imposter meter that looks exactly like an analog. You will see the name Landis-Gyr, Landis-Gyr, and that will look exactly with the mechanical dials, but it has the digital components and it has all the evils of a smart meter. So the way you tell if you have a safe and lawful meter, and I mean lawful because it is unlawful to emit radiation on private property without consent. It is unlawful to conduct surveillance on property without consent. There is a data recorder in every digital meter. The way you find out if you have a safe and lawful meter is it has mechanical dials, and no digital face on it, and it does not have the name Landis-Gyr.
Okay, is it encased in anything? Because I saw a couple of suspicious looking things.
It looks just like a meter.
Okay,
Just,
not covered by anything.
and I'm here, and get me alone later, and I'll be happy to help you if you have more questions on that.
Great question. On the smart meter?
Yeah.
Okay, good, go ahead.
So I just mentioned in New Hampshire, 1,500 activists have already moved to New Hampshire. Some of them have been elected to office, state reps, and a few of them co-sponsored legislation that passed prohibiting the installation of smart meters without permission. Right. So, I mean, you guys can fight it here and dance around what it looks like, or you can just move to New Hampshire and say to hell with it. So, do not consent to any of this.
In an ideal world, or your ideal world, what would the solution to your issue be?
Real quickly, because obviously, you know. So real quickly.
Inspiration of self-government.
So I talk about economics and the crash that I think is coming, so there'd be enough, at this point it can't be stopped, I don't think, but enough households to be prepared so they don't get wiped out. And then again, the crucial thing from my perspective is that people know what happened at least, so they can tell their friends, so that when it does happen, they'll at least say, oh, these people were talking about this, and now I'm going to pay them more credibility in the future.
So as you know, I talked about geoengineering, but as an industrial hygienist and environmental specialist, my job is to make sure companies are compliant with OSHA and EPA standards. The biggest problem I see in my career field is the selective enforcement. So the little small business is being fined for improper waste disposal or emissions, or causing carcinogens in the workplace, people getting sick. And then the government does it. And the government is the biggest polluter. So what I think you can do is piss off the people who are supposed to enforce these standards. I've met EPA compliance officers who are very aware of things that go on and talked about it and got demoted. So I think if you actually, I don't want to say blow up because people think I'm a terrorist, but blow up their email. Call. You can, even if it's not in your workspace, you can still call OSHA, you can call the EPA. Trust me, there's people, they are required by law to read all that. Drive them nuts. Because it's the professionals in my career field, like me, I used to think all of you were crazy. Now I'm one of the crazy people. So I've invoked a lot of change from waking up my colleagues. So my advocate is not just for geoengineering, it's vaccines, it's fracking, it's smart meters. So it's just making sure that you are educating the professionals. Like I said, we are brainwashed at the school level, and we're brainwashed by the corporations.
Where we, as individuals, as human beings, as human spirits, don't hold anyone above ourselves.
My solution to that would be for everyone to make it known and make it aware that they will not let that right be violated. And I in no way advocate defensive, you know, I mean, I in no way advocate offensive violence, but defensive force if necessary, and just to assert that you will resort to that if need be, but do everything in your power to avoid it.
If I could do anything and teach anything, I would want to create a society where everyone in this room didn't believe a single word that was told up here today. That we stop consuming information and start becoming educated on our own about these issues. Stop becoming mindless people that believe whatever you hear and think in 140 characters or less. Because you will not be passionate about anything to the point where you will have the courage to defend what you believe if you are not educated first.
If we're all clear on these general principles, and people who not only have those principles then decide to become activated and do something about it, so they don't just complain and grumble and say, well, this is a better idea and we should do this and we should do that and we should make sure that we have a new structure. How are we going to do that? They've got to get off their couches and go out there and get active and become influential as leaders. Go from intellectuals to becoming leaders. So it's all summed up with our little slogan, which is, why fight City Hall when you can become City Hall?
You can impact the health of your family by simply making better choices. But every time you go to these doctors and spend all your money on all these tests and take their drugs, you're continuing to perpetuate a huge problem. So I believe that we really have a chance.
I have been learning an awful lot from listening to everybody else. I've heard huge philosophical issues being discussed. Now, I'm not prepared to discuss them. I can tell you my answer to your question is really easy, probably easier than anybody else's, because I'm going to see my answer. I'm going to see what I want happen. It's already started to happen. It's going to happen in my lifetime. It's not a big amorphous thing. It's an easy thing. I want to see drugs legalized. I want to see all of this stuff taken out of criminal justice. And it's already started. Drugs, the use of drugs, taking drugs, should not be a matter for criminal justice. If people have a problem with drugs, with any substances, they should be able to get help and not go to prison, not get a criminal record, not have problems with jobs, not have problems with education.
20 years ago, you wouldn't even see a meeting like this. The change we want is happening because we are being the change. Exactly. And that is what will cause it. And don't give up, and you know, just being at this meeting is something you probably wouldn't have been able to do 20 years ago. So we don't have to worry about inventing or finding what is the darn solution. The solution is just, you know, look at these agendas that are being worked against us. You know, who was it was talking about? They're like from 200 years ago. They don't give up on their agendas. An agenda that lasts long enough becomes reality.
To me, the only solution is hard work. We are never going to achieve a utopian society, a society where everybody is happy. We are human beings. We are built for conflict with one another. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. Dissent is not necessarily a bad thing. But we have to work hard to remain as free as possible, in my opinion, and to rein in tyranny, rein in corruption, and actually try to prosecute and convict corporate and government criminals. That's how we maintain our free speech and our freedom in this country.
So, you know, my solution is basically to get out of Long Island. It's no joke. I mean, if you want liberty in your lifetime, you know, we can talk about these things. Well, if you want liberty in your lifetime, like now, you have to make the move. And I mean, you know, we talk about the issues. You guys believe in the cause, but start living it. Please, like, help me fight the good fight up there. I believe in it. I'm sorry? I would love to talk to you guys after. All right, well, thanks, guys.
I would encourage you guys to go to a local meetup and just hear what they have to say. I think Bitcoin is super hard to understand. It took me literally, I don't know even how long, until it sunk in. But once it did, I think it's the most invigorating thing that I've seen. I think that before that I was really gung-ho about music, and obviously I am, you know, I'm a singer, but I think that what Bitcoin has accomplished is a way to opt out. It's a way to take your money out of the system. It's a way to vote with your dollar.
Avoid genetically modified organisms. This is a serious warning. You have been told. If you're struggling with health issues, investigate the topic on your own. Don't just obey Jonathan. Find out on your own. Come to your own conclusions, but I would strongly suggest that you really look into it and stay away for a lot of reasons.
Everyone you know, and get it. And you can, if you don't want to get it today, order it at Amazon. It's on Amazon. Exploring the Global Road to Ruin through education. It's education. It's nothing else. All these other issues will be solved once you get this one solved.
It's now 37 years that I'm cancer-free, but so many doctors like, well, I don't understand. I go, do you want to explain it? No. It conflicts with what I was taught. Okay? I had a gal who had uterine, ovarian, and double lung cancer. They gave her 3 weeks to live without chemo and 2 to 3 months with chemo. Okay? And that was October 7th, 2003, and by December 11th, no evidence of cancer. Okay? A couple weeks. Well, a year later, 2004, that doctor took me to court and sued me and wanted to be arrested and put in jail because I did against what the medical so-called protocol was, and he was entitled to $25,000 in chemo treatments. Okay, I had to go to court for this. So we'll go to court, and then the judge was like, well, where's your attorney? I said, ma'am, she goes, I am your honor. Because when you prove it to me, I'll call you your honor. Right now you're man. And so I said, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, I'd rather go to jail because the inmates are more honorable than you. Okay? So she wasn't too happy. And so then his attorney ripped me apart for like 20 minutes how people like me belong behind bars, and I said, I don't drink. And then they were ripping me apart. So finally, the judge is like, all right, Eichhorn, how long did this person survive under your protocol? And Julie's standing up. I said, hello, I'm over here. And she's like, you're still alive? And she said, did I disappoint you? So then the judge walked out, there's a door behind, she walked away, disappeared, came out. She goes, well, I'm going to dismiss this, but I want you to sue the doctor and the attorney individually, and I want to be the judge on the case. I said, ma'am, I said, Your Honor, I said, I don't believe in suicide. I said, let's just move on, and that's how. Now, my point in this is that the doctors are under such, not all, but too many are under this, they can do what they want and they're protected so that they don't care if the patient dies. It's about money. And the society has to wake up and say, I'm going to do my own research, I'm going to stand up, and like you're talking about, even in their liberty and such, excuse me, part of that liberty must be, you got to take self-responsibility. I have 90% of the people who don't want to hear what I talk about. And I said, that's fine. You know, people argue with me because, you know, you're right. Pretty soon you'll be dead, right? Yeah. And so it's a matter of not being mean, but society has to take responsibility for their own actions and their interests so that what you're talking about works more effectively.
I invite you to check out our website. It's psehealthyenergy.org. Some of the guys that I work with published a study last year entitled Converting New York State's All-Purpose Energy Infrastructure to One Using Wind, Water, and Solar by 2050. And so they kind of lay out the economic and technical feasibility of doing just that. So really all that lies in the way is political will. And obviously zoning issues, regulations, things like that. But It's certainly technically and economically feasible at this point.
My strength is creating images. I donate my services to dozens of websites and documentaries and magazines like InfoWars. And I think that's what I do. It's the only thing I know how to do. That's what I'm good at. And everybody's good at something. So I say, go with your strengths. Don't try to make a buck off the Liberty Movement. I donate my work to many different causes.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it from my perspective. I really do. You're doing something and other people aren't, so that places you right there in the elite of our own community. Thank you so much.